Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Have you ever imagined what terror an engineered bioweapon could unleash if it escaped control? Let's get into the story. The alarms screamed like banshees, their shrieking wail echoing through the cold, sterile corridors of Outpost Zeta. Xylvan scientists, their carapace-like exoskeletons gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light, scrambled with a mixture of terror and scientific fervor. Commander Skriel clicked his mandibles in agitation. In over 3 decades of service to the Xylvan Empire, he had never witnessed anything remotely like this. The subject-designated specimen X-01 was out. Worse, it was on the rampage, and the outpost's automated defenses were proving pitifully insufficient. "Report!" He barked at a trembling technician, his spindly legs jittering with barely contained panic. "Sir," stammered the technician, her thorax heaving. "Specimen X-01 has breached Containment Sector 4. Security units are being dismantled." Skriel hissed, his antennae twitching in alarm. They'd thrown everything they had at Specimen X-01. Shock charges, paralytic agents, even weaponized sonic blasts designed to exploit insectoid physiology. Useless. The creature shrugged off their attempts with horrifying ease, adapting faster than they could change tactics. He cursed the day the High Council had authorized Project Chimera. The promise of the ultimate bioweapon had blinded them to the risks. His comm unit crackled. It was high command, his worst fears confirmed. "Commander, explain this." "Abomination," came the accusatory rasp of High General Zithrak. Skriel swallowed hard. "General, we've lost containment. Specimen X-01. He paused, searching for the right words, the right way to convey the utter disaster that was unfolding. "It is learning, adapting at an unnatural rate. We cannot stop it." A long, chilling silence fell over the comm channel. Zithrak was known for his ruthlessness. Whole worlds had been reduced to ash for less than this. Finally, the general spoke, his voice so low it was nearly a hiss. "Do what you must, Commander. Outpost Zeta is expendable. The specimen is not." "General, with respect," Skriel began, but the transmission cut off. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. Orders like that meant they had written off everyone on this outpost, sacrifices for the glory of the Empire. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling they had sacrificed far more than just a few thousand soldiers and researchers. There was a screech of tearing metal followed by a roar that shook the outpost to its core. It was coming. Skriel made a decision. He wouldn't go down without a fight. At the very least, they would buy some time. "Activate Emergency Protocol Zeta-9, he ordered. "Contact the humans." General Mikhail Sokolov, a bear of a man with a face etched by decades of conflict, stared at the Xylvan holographic projection with disgust. Commander Skriel, a mere shadow in the dim blue flicker, looked harried. The Xylvan's usually rigid posture hunched in barely concealed fear. "General Sokolov." Skriel's voice carried a desperate edge, unusual for a Xylvan commander. "I must request immediate assistance. We have a containment breach." Sokolov narrowed his eyes. "Containment breach?" "Skriel, be specific. Are we talking about one of your lab bugs getting loose?" He knew how easily they engineered pathogens as weapons. "Negative, General." There was a click of mandibles before Skriel continued. "Project Chimera, it has escaped." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Project Chimera, the Xylvan's whispered superweapon project, was the stuff of nightmares. Rumors of forced genetic hybridization and grotesque experimentation drifted through intelligence channels, each more horrifying than the last. Sokolov had hoped they were exaggerated, something to keep his superiors and the public in a state of controlled anxiety. "How bad?" he asked, his voice steady. "It is slaughtering everyone on the station." Skriel's voice was raw, the usual arrogance replaced by something akin to terror. "Your conventional weapons are of little use against such a creature." Sokolov grunted. That sounded about right. He glanced at his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Volkova, who stood at rigid attention beside him. She gave a barely perceptible nod. It was real. Damn. He cleared his throat. "Very well, Commander. We will consider offering assistance." The surprise on the Xylvan's face was almost comical. The Empire's hatred for humanity was exceeded only by their arrogance. Yet here they were, begging for help. Sokolov savored the irony for a brief moment, then his mind turned to practicalities. This wouldn't be some standard containment operation, and he wasn't about to send his regular troops in blind. I have one team capable of handling unconventional threats. If you agree to full disclosure, I'll consider deploying them. Skriel hesitated, but eventually nodded. Agreed. Transmitting coordinates now. Sokolov motioned Volkova over. Summon Captain Jones. Tell him he's got himself a very special field trip. Then he turned back to the Xylvan. Commander, I strongly suggest you prepare a secure landing zone. And remember, this is our operation now. Before Skriel could reply, Sokolov severed the connection. This just got a whole lot more interesting and dangerous. Captain Harry Jones did not like surprises, and if General Sokolov's gruff summons at an ungodly hour was any indication, this surprise was likely to be of the particularly unpleasant variety. He made his way to the underground bunker complex beneath Moscow with the heavy tread of a man expecting bad news. Sir, Lieutenant Volkova snapped to attention as he entered Sokolov's austere office, the faint smell of stale coffee and weapon lubricant hanging in the air. Sokolov, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, barely glanced up from the datapad in front of him before jerking a thumb at a holographic display hovering in the center of the room. It showed what could only be a Xylvan research outpost, a labyrinthine metal structure hanging ominously in the void. Jones, he rumbled, study this. You're going on a trip. Jones squinted at the display, a knot of unease forming in his gut. The station looked like a slaughterhouse. Torn metal panels littered the corridors, and in a few places he could see what looked like viscous smears of something coating the walls. Trouble on a bug nest, sir? He asked cautiously. Sokolov grunted. Worse. Much worse. Project Chimera got loose. Jones felt the blood drain from his face. Project Chimera. The Xylvan's mad science nightmare. How loose? It's taken over the whole damn station, wiping out everyone inside. He resisted the urge to curse. This wasn't a cleanup job, it was a suicide run. He ran a hand over his close-shaven scalp, considering. His team could handle themselves, but against an engineered monstrosity? The odds were not in their favor. Sir, he said finally, sending in a small team is like spitting on a wildfire. My men aren't miracle workers. I never said they were, Sokolov replied, a glint in his eye. But they're the best shot we have. The Xylvans are begging for help. Think of the PR possibilities, Jones. Humans saving the day right under the Empire's noses? Besides, he leaned forward, it's not like you have much choice. Jones knew that tone final, with a touch of dark amusement. Best shot or not, they were going in. Understood, sir? You want it contained or neutralized? Preferably contained, Sokolov said. This thing could be a valuable asset, if properly harnessed. Jones snorted. Playing God never ends well, sir. The general didn't smile. See that you prove me wrong, Captain. Dismissed. As Jones turned to leave, he heard Volkova speak. His team, sir? The unconventionals, as they call themselves? Yes, Sokolov sighed. Those maniacs are our only hope. Now inform them of their new mission. Jones walked out, the prospect of facing an unknown biological horror heavy on his mind. Time to assemble the team. It seemed like his unconventionals were about to get a whole lot more unconventional. The unofficial headquarters of the unconventionals was less a war room and more a sprawling basement workshop filled with the organized chaos that marked their unique brand of warfare. It buzzed with the controlled frenzy that preceded a mission. Tech whizzes hunched over salvaged alien tech, a medic meticulously packing a trauma kit brimming with questionable liquids, and a hulking figure in the corner methodically assembling a weapon that looked like it should belong on a small tank rather than in a single person's hands. Captain Jones swept into the room, his weathered combat boots echoing on the concrete floor. All focused on him, their usual banter replaced by a tense anticipation. All right, listen up, he barked, his voice cutting through the hum. "We're going off-world. Target a Xylvan research outpost. Codename Outpost Zeta." A collective groan rumbled through the room. "Xylvans?" Doc, the medic, a man who'd patched up more Black Ops soldiers than he cared to remember, winced. "Thought we swore off dealing with those cockroach bastards." "We did," Jones confirmed grimly. "Circumstances have changed. Seems the bugs cooked up something nasty, and now that thing is tearing its creators a new one." He glanced at Tiny, the demolitions expert, loading her oversized cannon. "It's the kind of party we specialize in crashing." Tiny grinned, revealing a gap-toothed smile. "Finally, something worth blowing sky high." Sparks, the tech specialist, a lanky young man with eternally grease-stained fingers, piped up nervously. "Sir, got any details? Like, what kind of nasty?" Jones tossed a datapad onto the central workbench. On it flickered the same holographic feed Sokolov had shown him. Gutted corridors, mangled Xylvan bodies, a sense of relentless, monstrous power. "Project Chimera," Jones said curtly. "Gene-spliced abomination. Intel's thin, but it sounds like the Xylvans lost control." He tapped the display, where an insectoid form bristling with mismatched limbs stalked through a ruined chamber. "We're to contain it, preferably alive. Command wants us to bring it back." Silence fell. It was one thing to deal with unknown alien threats, another to face something designed to be the ultimate weapon, a thing likely bred from their own nightmares. Jones let them absorb it. He knew his team. Crazy as they were damn good at what they did. He'd handpicked most of them, seen them pull off the impossible time and again. "Don't like it either," he grunted. "But orders are orders. Grab your gear, wheels up in 20. Doc," he nodded at the medic, "better pack some industrial-strength tranquilizers and enough antibiotics to cure a plague. Sparks, I expect you to be knee-deep into their systems the moment we land. This mission, ladies and gents," his voice hardened, "we go into the belly of the beast." The unconventional grin was back on Tiny's face. "Well, nothing says welcome like a well-placed explosive. Right, Cap?" Despite the grim situation, Jones felt a familiar battle lust kindling. The unconventionals weren't known for playing it safe. This was a mission tailor-made for the kind of chaos they thrived in. Their transport ship, an unmarked needle of black metal designed for rapid insertion and stealth, cut through space with practiced efficiency. Inside, the team was a whirlwind of controlled activity under the harsh strip lighting. Doc, muttering under his breath, assembled an injector rifle capable of downing an enraged rhinoceros. Sparks was interfacing his data rig with the ship's system, preparing to burrow into the Xylvan data network the moment they docked. Tiny hummed a tuneless dirge as she lovingly caressed her overpowered weaponry. Captain Jones sat back, eyes closed, the strategic cogs in his mind already whirring. "Sparks," he spoke finally, "what can you glean from the limited intel we have?" The techie typed furiously. "It's messy, sir. The Xylvans were tight-lipped about Project Chimera. Best I can tell, it's a fusion experiment. Multiple species spliced together, likely designed for adaptation." "Adapts how?" asked Jones. "That's the scary part, Captain. They were aiming for accelerated evolution in response to threats. It learns, changes, gets stronger as you fight it. We need to hit it hard and fast." Doc muttered a choice curse under his breath. "Just bloody peachy." Their ship shuddered as it linked with Outpost Zeta's airlock. The Xylvans, desperate as they were, weren't entirely stupid. The docking zone was depressurized, bathed in sickly red emergency lights. Jones rose, his heavy combat suit clanking as he moved. "Remember, folks," he said, "this isn't a rescue mission. We're not here to save any bugs." He hefted his own specialized rifle, a prototype electromagnetic coil gun with enough punch to shatter reinforced armor. "Our job is to bring back the prize, alive, if we can manage it." The airlock hissed open, revealing a scene ripped straight from a horror show. Slashes marred the metal walls, the floor sticky with a mix of fluids Jones didn't want to identify. Broken Xylvan bodies lay in grotesque positions, the stench of death and burnt ozone clogging the air. "Tiny," Jones said, "you're on point. Sparks, eyes on security feeds. Doc, I hope those antibiotics of yours work on mutant super beasts." Tiny grinned maniacally and led the charge into the ravaged station, her massive weapon held at the ready. If anything was waiting for them in the shadows, it was in for a hell of a surprise. The journey through the outpost was a nightmare symphony. Smashed consoles, shattered containment units, and the ominous silence punctuated by the distant, echoing screeches of unseen horrors set their teeth on edge. Sparks kept them barely one step ahead of the station's automated defenses. "Captain," he hissed, his voice tight. "They're rerouting security systems. It's hurting us. Trapping us." "Where?" Jones demanded. "Sub-level 4. Must be where they kept the prototype. Damn." Sparks yelped as the station lights flickered and died, plunging them into near darkness. "Change of plans," Jones barked into his comm unit. "We're going straight to the source. Tiny, can you get us down there?" A guttural chuckle echoed through the comms. "Consider it done, Cap." A moment later, a deafening explosion ripped open a hole in the floor, revealing the dimly lit level below. Jones didn't hesitate. He leapt through the opening, landing with a bone-jarring thud. The others followed. The air pulsed with a strange energy, the scent of ozone growing sharper. There was an unnatural stillness in the darkness. "Lights," Jones ordered. Sparks obliged, flooding the chamber with harsh tactical lights. Then they saw it. It crouched in the center of the chamber, a hulking, grotesque mass of muscle, chitin, and far too many mismatched limbs. The flickering lights revealed segments of insectile carapace, reptilian scales, the remnants of what might have once been Xylvan limbs, and a fanged maw dripping with acidic-looking saliva. It twitched and spasmed, as though multiple instincts warred within it. Despite its monstrous form, the creature exuded a terrible, almost intelligent focus. Its multiple eyes, far too many, and in seemingly random arrangements, tracked their every movement. This was no mindless beast. It was a hunter, and they were the prey. "Dear God," breathed Doc, his hands shaking slightly as he readied his injector rifle. "It's still evolving." Tiny, in contrast, grinned like a feral predator. "Always did want to bag something big," she said, hefting her absurdly large weapon with practiced ease. Sparks was tapping furiously at his wrist console, muttering a stream of tech jargon to himself. "Targeting systems are offline. Damn thing's scrambling the signals. We're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way." Jones remained silent, calculating. This wasn't some overgrown insect to swat down. Every fiber of his tactical instinct screamed that this was a fight unlike any they had faced before. Still, his mission was clear. Contain, subdue, bring back. He refused to fail. "Tiny," he said, his voice low. "I need a distraction. Sparks, find me a weak spot, something in its systems we can exploit." "Aye, aye, Cap." Tiny charged forward with a roar, her weapon spitting hypersonic slugs that sent sparks flying off the creature's hide. It roared back in fury, clawed insectoid limbs swiping at her, forcing her to dance backwards. Sparks, fingers flying across his wrist-mounted rig, shouted, "There! Subdermal control node, right shoulder base." Jones nodded grimly. He took his shot, the electromagnetic pulse of his rifle aimed at the spot Sparks indicated. The slug slammed home, causing the Chimera protocol to rear back, a piercing metallic wail shaking the room. "Doc now!" Jones yelled over the din. Doc, using the distraction, took careful aim, firing several tranquilizer darts in rapid succession. They found their mark, sticking into the beast's pulsating flesh. The creature staggered, its movements slowing slightly, but the effect wasn't immediate. "It's adapting! Resisting!" cried Doc in frustration. The Chimera turned its gaze onto Doc, a low, guttural growl rumbling within it. Before anyone could react, it lunged. Jones shoved Doc out of the way, narrowly avoiding a scything claw that shredded his combat armor. He rolled, coming up firing. The battle raged on. The creature's ferocity was as unpredictable as its form, making it nearly impossible to predict its next move. Explosions from Tiny's weapon pitted its hide. Doc's darts finally began taking a greater effect, and Sparks' attempts to overload its systems caused it to twitch and spasm erratically. Yet, the Chimera protocol was relentless. It battered aside their attacks, adapting to their tactics. This wasn't a mere victory condition. It was a fight for survival. The fight drained away into an exhausted, pulsating silence, leaving a symphony of pain in its wake. Tiny leaned against a ruined console, a vision in scarlet, her gashes leaking as much of the creature's acidic blood as her own. Her massive weapon was lost, a mere footnote in the epic struggle, but she refused to retreat. her wild eyes never leaving the downed creature, mirroring its mix of monstrous and broken. Doc staggered over, his face usually filled with a mix of sarcasm and weary compassion, now a mask of strained exertion. Sweat dripped from his brow, mingling with the creature's acidic blood splattered across his cheek. He'd emptied his trauma kit, pushed his knowledge to the limits. Every last tranquilizer had been injected, but victory hadn't come without a price. Sparks cradling a makeshift tourniquet to stem the oozing blood from a shard of chitin embedded in his leg, still hunched over his devastated data rig. His fingers, twitching from shock and adrenaline, danced across the screen, seeking a final opening, a final way to ensure the creature remained neutralized during the fraught return journey. Jones himself was a brutal sight. His shredded armor revealed angry burns, the legacy of taking a blast meant for Sparks. Even his coil gun, that symbol of cutting-edge tech, was now a twisted hunk of metal, warped and ruined in the climactic battle. Despite the pain racking his body, his will, that unbreakable core that had seen him through countless missions, remained unbroken. But it was a bitter resilience. He'd wrestled with charging rhinos, faced down alien warlords, and survived betrayals and ambushes that would have broken lesser men. Never, though, had he fought an enemy so ruthlessly efficient, so capable of adapting to meet any challenge. Each wound the Chimera suffered spurred some twisted evolution, its body morphing and shifting in real time to counter their assault. The creature roared its defiance, the final echo of its monstrous rage, before a massive reptilian tail smashed into Jones. Ribs shattered, sending lances of fiery agony coursing through him. He crashed into a bulkhead, darkness edging his vision, his focus narrowing to a pinpoint of pain. Through the haze, he saw the creature stalk towards him. Death loomed, a predator zeroed in on its crippled prey. His hand reached for his sidearm, a final defiant gesture, but his body refused to obey, screaming in protest. He was done. They were all done. The creature was too powerful, too adaptable for their ingenuity and tenacity. A feral snarl, a primal battle cry older than even humanity itself, echoed through the room, followed by a sickening, meaty thud. The Chimera staggered, and Jones, in bleary confusion, saw a flash of red, a blur of motion. Tiny. Despite her injuries, she'd retrieved a jagged piece of debris, a length of twisted reinforcement beam that glittered with the creature's caustic fluids. It was a weapon born of desperation, of utter defiance, and driven home with the last remnants of her strength. The Chimera, focused on Jones, barely saw her coming. Tiny drove the makeshift spear through the back of its skull with shocking force. The creature let out a deafening screech, a noise that seemed to rattle the very core of the outpost, its entire body spasming wildly before slumping to the ground. Tiny stood amidst the blood-splattered wreckage, chest heaving, her weapon dripping a foul mix of bloods. Doc limped over, a hastily jury-rigged syringe in his hand. With trembling hands, he pumped a massive final dose of tranquilizer into the downed beast, the last echoes of its screeching dying away into an eerie silence. The battle was won, but it felt like a hollow victory. They stood surrounded by devastation, the station ripped to shreds, Sparks clutching his wounded leg with a pained hiss, their own battered bodies mirroring the ruin around them. The creature itself, that nightmarish embodiment of biological warfare gone out of control, was an obscene monument to ambition gone wrong. And there it was, the daunting question of hauling it back to Earth, along with the Xylvan data Sparks miraculously salvaged. But worse, a nagging, unsettling question lingered. What would their superiors back home do with such a weapon? Were they truly any different than the Xylvans they'd risked their lives to stop? Jones, leaning heavily against the bulkhead, pushed those thoughts away. That was a problem for another day, another battle he wasn't sure he had the stomach to fight. He had to focus on the present. He'd worry about the ethics and the distant superiors who would soon demand answers when they were safely back on Earth. For now, it was enough that they had done the impossible. The unconventionals, beaten but unbroken, had faced a monster head-on and lived to tell the tale. The journey home was going to be one hell of a ride, filled with uneasy alliances, hard questions, and the lingering horror of what they had faced. The return trip was a strange limbo, a mix of quiet exhaustion and a strange, lingering dread. They'd subdued a monster ripped straight from nightmares, yet unease had seeped into their bones with a chilling persistence. The Xylvan crew, once arrogant and fearful, watched them with an unnerving mix of grudging respect and a new kind of fear. They, like everyone soon back on Earth, would view the unconventionals differently. They had ventured into the horrific unknown and emerged battered but victorious. As they docked, it wasn't relief that coursed through Jones, but a heavy sense of trepidation. Sparks, despite his wound, was already muttering about firewalling the Xylvan data from prying eyes. The knowledge they carried was a weapon as potent as the unconscious monstrosity below decks, a scientific Pandora's box that would ignite greed, ambition, and a chilling echo of the Xylvan's fatal desire to control nature itself. Doc, his medkit empty and his spirit as weary as his body, caught Jones's eye as the airlock opened. "What did we truly come back with, Cap?" he asked quietly. "Was it victory, or did we just haul a new kind of plague home?" Jones had no answer. Not then, amidst the bustle of soldiers, medics, and scientists with hungry eyes focused on their monstrous cargo. There were no cheering crowds, no celebratory bands like the propaganda broadcasts often showed. It was a clinical, guarded operation, with whispered orders and the lingering tang of disinfectant in the air. This wasn't a proud homecoming, but the start of a new battlefield, one fought not in distant outposts, but within the corridors of power and the shadowy realm of scientific ethics. General Sokolov, as immaculate as ever, waited at the end of the ramp. His eyes flicked over Jones and his team, taking in their injuries and the unspoken burdens they carried. "You found strength when others failed, Captain," he declared, his voice cutting through the hum of activity. "The Republic owes you a debt." Jones felt a surge of bitterness. Debt? What was owed wasn't medals or promotions, but answers he wasn't sure even Sokolov had. The world would celebrate this as humanity's triumph, the audacious capture of a nightmare, proof of their ingenuity and resilience. Few would see the chilling reflection within. The fact that to beat the monster, they might need to become a little more monstrous themselves. "Drinks," Tiny said as they filed off the ramp, her arm still slung casually around Jones's shoulders. "Not just good ones, Cap. The stuff usually hidden in underground vaults beneath bunkers guarded by laser grids and grumpy ex-spies." Jones nodded absently, already strategizing. Drinks, yes, they deserved those. But more importantly, they would need allies. Those who saw the darkness lurking both in the Xylvan data and the eyes of ambitious men like Sokolov. The fight for Outpost Zeta might be over, but a new, more insidious one loomed on the horizon. It would be waged in sterile labs, in shadowy conference rooms, a battle for humanity's soul. And once again, the unconventionals would be on the front lines, facing a threat no less monstrous for being born within their own walls.